Good morning, everyone, and we are back in Ecclesiastes. We spent last week discussing the first six chapters, and today we will complete the next six. Um, as we began last week, I had mentioned to you about the fact that the book of Ecclesiastes tells us about the brevity and the transient nature of life, something which we may have missed in the text, but nevertheless, today I want to come a full circle to wrap it all up. In the fact that the book of Ecclesiastes tells us to really make the best out of life. And there were three things that I mentioned of the themes that God has revealed to us. And that number one is really to enjoy life. And it's about life under the sun. It's a very Hebrew phrase that says that, no, this is what we can see, right? From the start of life, the birth to death, under the sun, and we make the best out of it and to enjoy the this world that God has made for us. And that's something somewhat difficult for many of us to handle, but that's what the Bible says. But the second part that we will see a lot more today is about fearing God. We tend to gloss over this phrase, fear God, because we don't grow up with a concept that no of the greatness of God and the sternness of God with regards to watching over us in our lives. And we'll see that a little bit more today. The third one, which we didn't quite see, is about keeping the commands of God. And that is something which we will spend some time on in chapters 11 and 12, which I hope to spend a little bit more detailed time on. Today, continuing on with verse 7. Life is brief, remember? And the Hebrew think forward. Life moves forward. And as they move forward, they can see what has happened and they glean from it. And so the Koheleth, the author, Solomon, actually reflects on all this. And he's given wisdom by God. He asked for wisdom. Why? Because he really wants to understand life and hence left this book for us. So, what about life that is so uh, important as lessons left? And these are the themes that he left in this book. Now, continuing on, he thinks about life. He says, a good name right here is better than precious ointment. A precious ointment is something which we are not familiar. Um, I guess the similarity to us today would be expensive perfume, right? You got your Chanel and whatever, and it costs you like 1,000, 2,000 ringgit per small little bottle. But he says a good name is better than all of these things. And there's a whole lot of things that is compared. But the fact is, the word name is character, and character can be seen. So a good character is better than anything that's precious to us, because the thing that we develop over the years as we grow up is a good name. And to protect a good name is very, very important. But the comparison that in chapter 7 moving forward is something more sober. The Koheleth looks at the finality of time under the sun, which is death. And he will tell us that, it's important for us to build ourselves a good name where people can remember. And so it's all about what is left after this life. Now, moving on, we look at verse 13. He says, consider the work of God. The Koheleth looks at life, and yet he turns his attention to God, which tells us this, that God is very real in his mind. God is not foreign. No. Some people may have thought that Solomon may have gone out of his mind talking about life under the sun. He didn't. Even in his old age, he is looking at life, trying to glean and understand wisdom. And he can see through and synthesize a whole lot more about life than we can ever do. But he says, consider the work of God, because he sees God in the very fabric of life. And he says, the word consider, by the way, right here, means to see, to perceive, to understand. Look at it carefully, the work of God and what he does. Now, in verse 15, he says, I have seen everything in my days of vanity. He sees God in all of these things, and man cannot fathom the immense and incredible, complex work of God in all facets of life. And yet he says, I have seen everything in my days of vanity. Now, again, we will come back to vanity, because vanity does not mean uselessness. Otherwise, Solomon would say that I've seen everything in my useless days. And Solomon is not useless, and our days are not useless. And so we have a little bit of translation problem there. And we will get back to that, because he comes back one full circle from chapter 1 into chapter 12. But he looks at life that, the just man will also die when he is doing righteousness. But the wicked man seems to keep his life when he is doing wickedness. And we see that as well. These are all facts of life. He's not giving anything immensely, intensively deep that, there's some secret of life. The secret here is, look at life as it is. There are good people and they die young. There are bad people and they don't seem to die. They seem to live very long. It happens in the day of Solomon, and it happens in our days as well. And these are realities of life. So when you read through the next few chapters, Solomon amasses a lot of these facts of life, from a Hebrew view, obviously, but the facts of life. And he always talks about dying. And it's very interesting. He says very little about birth, but he says a lot about life. Because the Hebrew view of living is to keep moving forward. What you do today affects what happens tomorrow. What has passed is past, right? You can't do anything about it. And so we need to understand the text from Solomon's viewpoint, that he keeps looking forward, that it is good that you get a good handle of this. Because with a view of death, you can then appreciate the brevity of life. Now, interestingly, he comes and tells us in verse 18. In verse 18, for he who fears God will escape them all. Now, it doesn't mean that you fear God, that all the bad things in life doesn't happen. But this is the second part of the theme that I've mentioned to you. Enjoy life, but fear God. And Solomon now begins to harp on this fear God. Because when you fear God, you would be very mindful of his judgments, that he is looking at what we do. And in the final judgment, we will escape all of these, because we will be judged according to how we live this life before God. And so fearing God requires us to be wise in what we do. I know when we all pray for many things in life. But, the book of James tells us that if any one of us is short on wisdom, we should ask for wisdom. The Bible never tells us to ask for 3,000 things in life. God has made us as intelligent beings that we can think, we can see, we can observe, we can learn, we can think, we can consider, we can ponder over. But one of the things that may have been missing in the natural life is the intense ability to piece it all together and make sense out of things. That although we may have experiences in life, we need wisdom to be able to apply them and to help others. And so wisdom is actually amassing a lot of experiences in life and be able to take those experiences and offer help to other people. It doesn't just get zapped into our mind. So when we ask for wisdom in the following verses that you can see, wisdom really comes from people who have lived life, appreciated life, understood life, and then be able to say, hey, this part of life applies and how it can help others. And Solomon is trying to do that here. He's leaving with us a heritage that we need to fear God and we need to grasp life. Now, people who don't grasp life would be just gallivanting and doing whatever they think they want. But when we say God says enjoy life, it's a gift of God, it has a balance. And the balance is from the fear of God. Because if you just think of enjoying life, you can go off in a tangent and you can do anything you want under the sun. And it's true. You can. And the more money you have, the more you can. But on the other side, Solomon, the wise, tells us, fear God. Fear God. And that is important. And then when he gets to the end of this chapter in 29, he says this, truly this is what I have found. He has this interim summation or what we call conclusions or summary conclusions, that God has made man upright. See, when God made man, he says God has made him upright. And upright is the Chinese word 正, right? He's straight. He walks straight. And but what happened? He says, but they have sought out many schemes. And this is the observation of Solomon. He says, well, although God may have made man upright to walk straight, they have started to devise all kinds of things to do apart from what God had originally made them for. And then he says that is not the right thing. That's his conclusion, right? He is just telling us what he has observed, and that's wisdom. And so he now goes on about wise man. Who knows the interpretation of a thing? And this is what I think we need to understand, wise in the interpretation of things. That is wisdom. According to Solomon, a wise man, a man who is wise, is one who can take life's lessons and look at what is happening and interpret it and then apply some of his learnings in life. I know we have been told all kinds of definitions for wisdom, but never is there a better explanation than from the biblical text, that wisdom in the eyes of God is not from the Oxford Dictionary. It is from God himself. And God asked Solomon, what do you want? And Solomon says, give me wisdom as a young man. And he is now older now, and he is describing this wisdom that he has. So a wise man is one who knows the interpretation of things. He looks at life, he looks at matters, and he now understands what it is beyond the surface, and taking from his experience to apply some of the lessons that can help people move forward. A wise man's wisdom makes his face shine. His sternness His face is changed. And so a wise man is one who doesn't react emotionally. He looks at life and he gives interpretation. And when he looks at it and it's good, he smiles. But when it is bad, his face changes, and you can actually see that he is sad and he is seeing more than what other people see. And wisdom gives insight that otherwise we can't, because many of us are only looking at the surface level of life. And so I trust that whenever I say enjoy life, we don't run off in a tangent, because that's not how wisdom is. Wisdom is to look at all aspects of life, and it's under the sun, and see the balance, Now, in the rest of chapter 8, it says, keep the king's commandment for the sake of your oath to God. Then you realize that we are foreign to this concept. Now, I say foreign. It's not about keeping the king's commandment that's foreign. The oath to God is foreign. In the days of King David and in the days of King Solomon, the people will gather at the coronation and says that we are your bones and we are your flesh. Basically, to tell them that we are linked in more ways than just commands. Then you are not just our king. When you say jump, we will ask how high. When you say run, we will say how far. There will be no question. So to keep the king's commandment is the oath or the promise that the people make to God, because the king represents the authority of God to rule over God's people. Now, the rest of this passages is about the king. The king has all kinds of powers, but the king can also be wrong. That's the thing. And although we keep our oath to God, and Solomon tells them, but observe what the king is saying. Do not take your stand for an evil thing and do whatever he pleases. And you know that in the history of the kings of Israel, the northern kingdom, and the kings of the southern kingdom of Judah, yeah, the kings did many bad things, or what you call evil, wrong in the eyes of God. And the people are not to follow him, but unfortunately, many people did. And hence God's punishment came upon them. But we all know that there were faithful men and women who followed what Solomon said, that they would not stand with evil. It's not just about the king representing God's authority, but it is also about the king to represent God's faithfulness. And hence, when faithfulness of God is not shown, then do not take his stand. So, is there a time where we stand for God and not for the king? Well, that's wisdom that we have. And the answer is yes. When authority do not stand on the side of God. Now, moving forward is all about listening to authority. And I like us to take a look at verse 10. As I mentioned earlier, Solomon is old, right? And many people say, yeah, of course, old people always look at death. I'm duly reminded when I was younger, we look at newspapers, those days when we do have physical newspapers. We will always look at the sports section, which is actually very much at the back of the newspaper. But then as time goes on, I don't really remember exactly when, but I would turn the last page to the next last pages, and you know what's in there, right? The obituary. And the obituary is about death. And sometime in life, we begin to look at death a whole lot more seriously than life. because for some innate reason, it is like verse 10 onwards that Solomon tries to bring to us. He is old. He is looking at the obituary, like many of us, I guess. And he says, yes, everyone is going to be buried. Just a side note. When the Bible talks about bury, they're not talking about our modern day nirvana. Okay. The idea of bury in the Hebrew context is to actually be placed with the fathers, be gathered to the fathers, and their burial is actually in a hole in a wall of the hills or the mountains, and that's how they bury the dead. Not like us when we dig in the ground. So though we use the same word bury in the English text, but be mindful that the Hebrew has a different understanding. So they have gone from this place and they will be forgotten. Though a sinner does evil 100 times and his days are prolonged, Solomon says, I surely know that it will be well with those who fear God, who fear before him. Well, the English word before him literally means to fear God to his face. Meaning when you are literally before God and you fear in front of him. And Solomon says, though both will die. The wicked will die, the good will die. The sinner may have done a lot of things and he may have lived long, but he will still die. But those who fear God will be okay come judgment day. And that is the aspect of fear that Solomon is now synthesizing for us. But it will not be well with the wicked. Although he prolong his days, he will be like a shadow. Because he does not fear before God. Now, moving forward, as I mentioned, this whole section talks about death. And it just keeps going right to the end. It is not that death is good, but death is real. Don't get me wrong. When Solomon talks about death, it is not saying that we all should live for death. It is to tell us that death is certain and life is short. Right? Life is short. And in verse 13, verse 15, it says, so I commended enjoyment. After he looks at all this and that life is short and death is certain, he comes again and theme number one, enjoy life. I commend enjoyment. And the word commend is to praise. I praise enjoyment, pleasure, to have joy in life. There is nothing wrong to have joy in life. We sing, I have a joy deep in my heart. But when we live, we forget that joy is like a bad thing. It's not. We need to be joyful, and it's good to be joyful because humanity, the word a man is not a man, by the way. It's humanity has nothing better under the sun than to eat, drink, and be merry. Now, we might be a bit appalled when we hear words like these. When it says, why would Solomon say, eat, drink, and be merry? I mean, we see these three things come together in the Hebrew text quite a lot. But in the book of Ecclesiastes, it seems to be quite prevalent. It stands out like a sore thumb. And he says, I laud glee, I laud joy, I laud pleasure in life. I commend it. It's good because humanity has nothing better under the sun. Remember, under the sun is this life that's under the sun, than to eat, drink, and be happy. be cheerful, right? Be excited about life. For this will remain with him in his labor all the days of his life, which God gives him under the sun. Now, when you look at the full text, you would see that the life that God has given humanity, and by humanity, all of us, under the sun, is labor. That's in Genesis chapter 3. And then chapter 4, we see Adam, when he was taken out of the Garden of Eden, had to work, labor. That's a fact of life. That there is no more Garden of Eden that he could just walk around plucking his meals. He would have to work hard for the meals. And to make it doubly hard, God imposed on the ground a defense mechanism of thorns and thistles, that it will make life harder than hard. But yet that is our life. Life is going to be hard under the sun, and it will remain all the days of his life, because that is how God has placed us outside the garden. Now, this is gift. God has given us the beauty of this life. And so I think what Solomon has done is he's seen the beauty of this life. That this life will continue to be laborious. And we all need to work. And some of us have to work harder than others. And it will continue. There is nothing that we say, well, one day when we don't work, food will drop from heaven like manna and we will be fine. And it won't. We know that for a fact. That's reality. And so he says humanity has nothing better to do than to eat, drink, and marry. And for some reason, I think that this is also very reflective of the Chinese culture. That when you get together, we always talk about the eating and the drinking and how we should enjoy ourselves. And that's how the Hebrew is. The Hebrew people are Orientals, very much like us. When they get together, remember, whenever you meet Jacob and Esau, it's about food. Whenever Jacob went to see Laban, it's about food. Whenever the men sit down, it's about food and drink. By the way, the word feast that we read in the Bible means to drink. To drink, to be merry. And they are very literal. They are not going to mince words about these things. So eat and drink, not drink grape juice, by the way. They drink wine. And they do go tipsy, and it's merriment. But drunkenness, that's something else. So eat and enjoy life, drink and be merry. When they left the Egypt, they had wine too, right? Bread and wine, matzah, right? And that was sober. But in the normal course of life, enjoying life is okay, because that's what we have. That's what we have. And so he says, I applied my heart to know wisdom and to see the business that's done on the land. Although no one sleeps day and night, I saw all the work of God, and that man will never be able to comprehend it. I think whatever man tries to do to understand the fullness of God, Solomon has given us the secret. Don't bother. Just appreciate the work of God, and you can never fully understand and comprehend everything God does. And so the Hebrew has a word called olam. Olam, if we will see that, means it used to be translated as forever and eternity, but that's not the case. It has one meaning that is beyond the horizon. And what is beyond the horizon? The Hebrews are very pragmatic people. They say they don't know. Whatever is the secret there, and God has not revealed to us, well, it belongs to God. And so Solomon is saying, I've seen all the work under the sun that man has done, and I try to understand it all. But you know what? Even though the wise man attempts to know it, he can't find it. He's just saying that I have spent all my life and years doing it, and I have an extra gift, by the way. I have the gift of God in wisdom, and I still can't find it. And so what do? Don't bother. Live under the sun the way that God has all intended. Now, I want to spend some time now moving into chapters 11 and 12. But just a brief one, I want to show you in verse 7. Another phrase, go, eat your bread with joy, drink your wine with a merry heart, for God has accepted your works. Let your garments be white, let your head lack no oil. So all of these words have balance, right? Eat your bread with joy. Go, enjoy your life, right? It's the fruit of your labor. Nothing wrong with that. But remember, there is God. There is God. And so let your garments be white. Make sure you are pure when you do all these things. And your honor to God lacks no oil. Well, oil is meant for anointment, right? Anointment. Anointment has nothing, no special magic. Anointment really is symbolic to say that you know your role before God. And it's usually given to the kings, to the priests, right? Your role before God, you cannot forget. You can enjoy your life, but it doesn't go off in a tangent, but you have your role before God always. So live joyfully with the wife whom you love all the days of your vain life under the sun, all your days of vanity. For that is your portion of life and the labor which you perform under the sun. Now, I know when you read this English word, it tells the man to live with the wife, but basically it has a connotation to the Torah. Just for our learning, the word Torah is feminine as a word, and it is depicted here to live with the instructions of God, whom you love all the days of your not useless life, but your short life. Because the amount of time we're given to obey God is not long under the sun. All the days of your brevity, not uselessness, right? That is our portion of life. And if that's our portion of life, that's what we have in hand to use. Nothing wrong with that, but always remember what God has instructed us. And in verse 10, whatever your hand finds to do it with your might. This is a very good advice to every one of us. I follow this like a mantra. It says, what you decide to do it with everything you've got. In modern contemporary words, do your best in everything you so choose. You see that? And the reason is this: having an eye on death, which is certain, the question to us is this: if you don't do it now like this, when? Because life is brief. If you don't do your best in everything you have set out to do, then when would your best ever be? And obviously, having a fear of God and a view of the judgment of God, this actually is an excellent advice to children. When they study your best. No, not everyone is going to be straight A's, but the best is what we have to offer. Then he goes on to talk about wisdom, the superiority of wisdom over foolishness. And I think we can now come to chapter 11, because that's where I want to spend most of our time, chapter 11 and 12, for the balance of our session. It says, cast your bread upon water, for you will find it after many days. Give a serving to servant, also to aid, for you do not know what evil will be on the earth. This whole segment are what we call Proverbs. Proverbs is not just found in the book of Proverbs. Proverbs is found all over the place, and also all over the place in the book of Ecclesiastes. Cast your bread upon the waters, for you will find it many days. The idea here is do good. Do good to others. And do good to others. Do not expect to see the person again. Because for some reason, at the right time, it will come back to recompense you. And that's what his Proverbs is trying to tell us. When you help somebody, don't be calculative, Don't keep a 555 book, 35 book, in the old days, the grocery and the bread guy will keep a 35, buku 35, to actually write down what you owe over the course of the month. And so he says, just do, help people. Don't think about it. You will find goodness coming back to you when you least expect. Go serve 7 people, also to the 8. Why stop at 7, right? Because you never know when evil is coming. And certainly in the life of the history of Judah, they suddenly got conquered by the Babylonians. And when that happened, it was really cruel. And the Babylonians are not the best of friends. And when will they help? There will be no time to help when trouble arrives. So when we have the chance, do it. And so in verse 9, he tells us this. Rejoice, O young man, in your youth, and let your heart cheer you in the days of your youth. Now, the English word youth, when you read it, it seems to talk about the same person. The Hebrew gives us a bit of nuance. And the reason I want to show you is because it is not about any young man. He's saying the word young man here is bakor. It comes from the word choice or choosing. That these are choice men. These are men who are able, who can do things, who has the prime of life, who has the youth in them, who can do great things. And so it says, oh, choice men who can fight, choice men who can labor. In your young days, you should rejoice. Now, remember, this is an old man, Solomon, talking to a young man, right? And the old man obviously thinks back, hey, I wish I could work and walk like him, jump like him, fight like him, but I can't. And so he looks back and says, oh, young man who is strong and valiant, let your heart cheer you on in the days of your prime. That you are so able to do many things in life, and you can do great things in life, but walk in the ways of your heart, in the sight of your heart. But know that for all this, God will bring into judgment. Therefore, remove sorrow from your heart, put away evil from your flesh, for childhood and youth are vanity, brief. And so he says, young man, go do it. I can virtually see you all, after church saying, young man, go and do this. You can carry the tables and chairs. And seriously, it's not that the elderly don't want to. They can't. Because the prime of life is no longer there. They can't do the ways of your heart. We want to climb Mount Kinabalu, but, ain't gonna happen, right? You can't walk 3 flights of stairs. The sight of your eyes, you wish you could read the Bible a lot longer, but nowadays, eyes gets tired. And so all these things, you can do many of these things, but also remember that God will bring you into judgment. So you see, Solomon always gives that balance in life. Young man, you can do all the things in life, but all the things in life would mean the good and bad. Right? And so when you go and do that, always remember God. God is always there. And there will be judgment. That's why we need to fear God. So put away sorrow from your heart, put away evil from your flesh. And that's how you should walk. For childhood. Childhood. For people in this group, maybe not many of you appreciate this word. The word childhood actually means black hair, right? When you're younger, your hair is black. And that's why the translator chose the word childhood. Black hair doesn't sound right in the English, right? But literally the word means black hair, where a person still have black hair. And it's equated to being young. Youth and black hair are equated in the Hebrew terms. I think in the Chinese terms too. You know, when you grow older, you know that when you have white hair, it resembles age. When you have black hair, it resonates with youth. And so it says, black hair and youth are vanity. Not useless, please. It's brief. When you get white hair, you will appreciate your black hair, right? When you have black hair, you don't care much about white hair. And so he says, it's brief. And so make sure when you live life to the fullest, there is God in the equation. And now I bring our attention to our final chapter, which is the most important chapter in the book of Ecclesiastes. He starts in chapter 1 and he ends in chapter 12, and he gives us an incredible insight of his summary. Remember. Remember means to bring to mind, to recall your creator. The word recall your creator, the word creator doesn't quite mean creator. Remember the one who has shaped you and filled you in the days of your youth, in your prime years. Remember the God who formed you. Remember the God who filled you with your energy of your youth before, right, the difficult days come. The interesting thing is the Koheleth, Solomon tells you, even though in the prime of your youth, you are strong, you're able, you know what? You can't control your days. There will be difficult days. And when the years draw near, when you say, I have no pleasure in them, when the sun and light and the moon, the stars are not darkened, and all these things, you know what Solomon is trying to say? Say, remember the Creator, God, who filled us, who made us this way at a time where we are young, at a time in a prime of life, in a time where we are in the choice life. Now, those of you who are in that age, chapter 12, verse 1, and the next segment is really for you. The reason being is, it is to remind them that there will come a point in time where you will grow old. That this prime of life, this youth life, this black hair will become no more. Don't think that it's going to be a long time. Now, I know young people always think that growing old takes a long time, and old people think that growing old takes a short time. But time is still the same. We all have the same 24 hours. But the Koheleth is trying to say that times are not always good. When you have the chance, you do what you can. When you don't have the chance, you need to be able to sweat it out. Because laboring in life is the thing. But keep an eye on death. He says, for a man will go to his eternal home. Now, interesting thing is the Old Testament doesn't really say much about what is that home. He just say that you're going away somewhere, and you will call it home because you left this home and you got to go to another home, and that's all. And it will go on and says it will be about the mourners, because the mourners will always remember the one who died. And just like the Chinese people, the funeral is when everybody gathers. For all intents and purposes, all other celebrations are not as important as showing up at somebody's funeral. I'm not sure whether you know what I'm talking about, but that's basically what the Chinese culture has been. If you were to pick between a wedding and a funeral, a birthday and a funeral, the funeral tops everything, because that's paying your last respect, remembering what has happened in life. For the rest, life is still going on, you still have a chance. And so it says, remember before the silver cord is loose. You must remember God until, the word before is until the silver cord is loosed. The silver cord is a highly valuable silver. Silver is actually money in the old days. Cord is cable. That's where we get the English word cable. The cable. The silver cable is loose. The word loose is broken. And thereby giving us a very vivid imagery of life snapped, which means death. Or the golden bowl is broken. The precious basin. No, the word bowl is not your rice bowl, right? If you remember in the temple, there is a basin of one piece and they call it a bowl. And many a times when I was growing up, I said, why do they have a little bowl sitting up in the courtyard? Actually, it's not a little bowl, it's a big bowl. It looks like a bowl, but the golden bowl is broken. And the word broken is crushed into fragments. The pitcher is a jar. And those days, Rebecca was coming to fetch water at the well. And Eliezer, the servant, was watching to see who is the right girl for Isaac. Well, that's what she has. Well, I guess in today's terms, we don't have pitchers. We have pails, right? So that would be our modern equivalent. Is shattered, is broken into pieces where you need it most. You are at the source of the water and there's nothing to hold the water. The wheel is broken at the well. You know, the well, they roll the bucket up. They have that, and the cisterns are very deep. And so when you reel up a 20-foot, there is no wheel, and there's no wheel, and you can see the water. It's of no use. And that is what he says. Remember the Creator before all these things happen, because when it happens, it's game over. Now, we know this word, game over. So I guess right here in these few lines, it is Solomon saying, remember God before it's game over, in that sense. And what does he express? We have here eternal home. He says the dust will return to the earth. The dust, Genesis chapter 2, verse 7, we are formed from the dust of the ground, right? The dust. So the dust will return to the land where we were first taken up from. You know what Solomon says? Solomon says it goes back one full circle. The word return is shuv. It's to go back to its original state. In Genesis chapter 2, verse 7, if you have a time, you go back and read. Genesis 2:7 says, God formed the man out of the dust of the ground, of the Adamah. And now the dust, the man, after making, will one day return, go back to where we came from, which is the ground. Right? But then the spirit will go back to God who gave it. Now, if you recall Genesis chapter 2, verse 7, and God formed the Adam out of the dust of the Adamah, and then God breathed into his nostrils the breath of life. And man became a living nephesh. That two components, the image and the likeness. The image being the shape, the likeness being the character. So the dust forms the image, the Spirit of God, the breath of God, the neshama of God, breathe into man. The two combined forms the living nephesh called man. And when man is game over, One will return to the ground where the dust is, return back to where it came from. And then the spirit, the ruach, the wind that is within man that you can't see, but you know it's in there because that's what's keeping us alive. And it will return to Elohim who gave it. And this is a return to the reference of Genesis chapter 2, verse 7. That is the Koheleth. That is his wisdom. He sees life as one full circle. It came and it ended. And how it came, it will end exactly the same way. And then he says, Vanity of Vanities, Havel, Havelim. And I want to wrap up by coming to a close. Vanity does not mean futile. Vanity does not mean uselessness. Now I know when we turn open our Webster or Oxford dictionary, we have a definition. I would say that definition doesn't apply, so we can put that aside. And then those of us with access to Hebrew lexicons, and then we turn open a Hebrew lexicon, whether it's the Strongs, whether it's the Brown Drivers and Briggs, whether it's Gesenius, a dictionary just gives us definitions. It doesn't explain the text. And so in the Hebrew concepts, they are all imagery, very, very Chinese, right? Very Chinese. And so the word vanity, havel, comes from exactly the same word as Abel in Genesis chapter 4. You know, Cain and Abel. And Abel doesn't mean useless. Abel doesn't mean futile. Abel means a breath of air, a vapor, a whiffs of vapor. And basically, if you imagine a wisp of vapor, you can see it, it's around, it's working, and then it's gone. And so the imagery gives us brevity. So brevity of brevities, says the Koheleth. All is brief. And so life under the sun is brief. Keep an eye on the end because it will come one full circle. So enjoy life. Fear God because he will judge. And now we come to the last point. Because vanity of vanity is not uselessness of uselessness. It is brevity of brevity. Everything is brief. Now, obviously, brief is relative, right? When you are under tremendous persecution and pain, well, a second is too long. But we all still have the same clock and the same time. The sun is still moving the same way. The moon is shaping the same way. Day is still shaping the same way. But it will come soon. So let us look at the final passage here. Because the preacher was wise. He still taught the people knowledge. Yes, he pondered and sought out and set in order many proverbs, which we have seen. This is the conclusion he's seen. He says, the preacher was wise. Solomon was wise. He got extra wisdom. If you have 1 cup, he would have a liter. Right? He has more wisdom than anyone else. But wisdom doesn't make him righteous. Wisdom only makes him know what to do. Every man still has our own will to do what is right. So he learns the wisdom and he taught the people. And here, taught is to learn is lamat, to teach is limat. And the whole idea here is the sound of the word changes. And this is one of those few special words there. In the normal term, it's to learn. But in the intensive form, it's to teach. You have to first learn before you teach. And so he has learned it in his wisdom of life, and he's now teaching the people knowledge. Knowledge means what? Knowledge means experience, things that you can learn and know. And then he pondered. The word pondered is adzan. I know in the Arabic word adhan is like, oh, the prayer. Actually, adhan comes from the word ozen, which is the ear. You have to hear and listen carefully. And he sought out and he examined everything. And then as he learned all these things, look at what he did. He put it into Proverbs. And that's what he has now given us in a package that now we have. What are Proverbs? What are Proverbs? Now, the word Proverbs are things that you can compare what you see in life with another that is equivalent, that can explain and express in more clarity. And that's Proverbs. Proverbs doesn't take you off in a tangent, right? It takes you into the wisdom of life, finding something equivalent to explain it in simpler terms that we can rationalize and understand and thereby get the aha. That is what we are supposed to do. That's what Proverbs is supposed to do. If it confuses us, we have missed the Proverbs. And so we have found many Proverbs in this chapter, in this book as well. The Koheleth was looking for acceptable words, and what was written was straight, words of truth. And so it does us well to search this out, words of truth. These words, not one word, all the words that the Koheleth has said are like goads. Now, for a long time, I was trying to figure out what goads are. Now, this is a balance of two sets. The words of the wise are like goads. The words of scholars are like well-driven nails. So well-driven nails and goads are nuances of the same thing. And so it gives us an idea. Goads are like sharp rods. When a farmer is training an ox to plow, and when the ox goes off course, he uses the little stick to prod it back into the right line. And that's teaching. Okay? And so in the old days, the rotan is that goad. But here it says the well-driven nails would be pegs. They don't have nails like we do, right? They have 10 pegs. And their 10 pegs are pegged into the ground so that it's firm and people's tents will not fly away. The word scholars come from two words. They are Baals, or the lords who always talk about good things. They talk about life. And these are people who sits around and discuss life. And the words of the wise are exactly this, the words of truth. And so it says, my son, because the people who are listening to him are younger, be admonished by these. The word admonished means to be warned. That's a very serious word, which I wish it was used as warned. So my son, be warned, which means that the things that he has said about enjoyment and fear of God is not a trivial thing. Be warned by this. By making many books or scrolls, there is no end. Scholars who sit down and write books after books and much study, and you keep studying it, it tires the flesh. He is saying that just looking for meaning of life in the books where everybody has written, Solomon is saying, you know what? I'm tired. I'm old and I still haven't found it. But let me tell you what I have found. Verse 13 and 14. Let us hear the conclusion of the whole matter. So he comes one full circle. He's a very good author, I would say. He starts well and he knows where to come to an end. And so I borrow him to come to an end. Let us hear. The word hear, or hear ye, O Israel. The word hear is to pick up sounds that you hear, what is read. It is to understand, and it is to decide to do something about it. You know, when parents tell the children, make up your room, pick up your toys, you expect your children to hear you. Same word, hear. Did you think your child is just hearing your voice and do nothing? Is that hearing? And obviously not. And so you say, son, why didn't you hear me just now? Why are you still playing your video games? Yeah, I hear you, mom. And then why are you still here? But I hear you, mom. So the child is saying, I hear means I pick up your sounds and that's it. But the parents say, when you hear me, is more than pick up the sounds, right? It is to do something about it. And that is what God always means by the word hear. Let us hear. And exactly how the mother tells the son, that's how God is telling us. Let us hear the conclusion. The conclusion is the finality of the whole matter. What matter? Everything that is under the sun. That's the whole matter. From chapters 1 to chapters 12, it's all about life under the sun. And life under the sun is not meaningless. Life under the sun is what God has given us. That's the only life we have. There is no life above the sun. So he is talking about the finality of this matter. This is my conclusion. From a wise man, fear God. Very simple. He's got so few words to say after talking about all the wisdom of life. Fear God. You know, fear God is something we never talk about these days. In fact, we probably don't like to hear about it because it conjures some very intensely sober and seriousness in our minds. But the Bible is replete with it, filled with it, and Kohelet says, yeah, enjoy life, eat, drink, and be merry, but fear God. Fear God means to be afraid of God. Why? There is a reason, and I told you the reason is that God will judge. He is a consuming fire. The book of Hebrews chapter 12 says that. The whole book, the Bible says, fear God, for he is a consuming fire. No, God is not a God that mind. He doesn't play with us. He is serious in what he says, and he wants us to do what he says. So keep his commandments. When we live life and enjoy, eat, drink, and marry, we have lots of freedom in life. But his commandments are instructions. Like the mother says, pick up your toys. Doesn't say you can't eat, but pick up your toys is something which you have to do. So there are things that is mandatory. Keep his commandments is mandatory. But eat, drink, and be merry is part of our option in life. Okay, you can choose not to be eating, drinking, and be merry. That's fine. You can keep working all your life, but Kohelet says, but this is given by God, you know. It's a gift of God. But keep his commandments. So when you eat, drink, and be merry, are you fearing God? And are you keeping and doing it within the framework of his commandments? I'm always mindful, since we're out of time, I want to remind us, maybe you could read Deuteronomy chapter 30, the whole of it. What is his commandments? And Moses said, God's commandments is not mysterious. It's not something that is a figment of imagination. It's not difficult to understand. Just like the mother tells the son, pick up your toys. It has no mystery. It has no depth that you need a PhD to understand what picking up your toys actually mean from the physics and science. Pick up your toys means pick up your toys. And God is very simple and clear in his commandments. For this is man's all. The word man is not a person. That is humanity, Adam. That is humanity's everything. And so God made man, and God made man under the sun, made man from the dust of the ground, and will return to the dust of the ground. God breathed into man the spirit, the neshama, and the spirit will return back to God who gave it. But the conclusion about this life under the sun is to fear God and keep his instructions. And this is everything God wants man to do. In this garden, there are 2 trees. All the trees you can eat, but the tree of the good and knowledge, the knowledge of good and evil, you shall not eat. That's his commandment. You see, commandment is not to tell you, you can't get out, you can eat this fruit, but eat it this way. God gives you the freedom of how you eat, drink, and be merry, but within the confines of his commandments. And that's all. Work and enjoy life. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is all. For God will bring everything you do into judgment. And fear God has to do with judgment. Remember, I gave you the example, fearing my dad, because every time I make a decision, the rotan imagery comes out. In the Hebrew culture, whenever they think of God and doing things, they will think of how God destroyed those people at Mount Sinai, where they worship the golden calf, right? They should be remembering many of these things. What happened in the wilderness to the sons of Aron who died inside the tabernacle? God is not a God who will fool around with his words. Fear him, because when he brings this ultimate judgment, it is death. And that's why you need to be afraid. And judgment is to help us live right, including every secret thing. The word secret means things that people try to hide, to conceal. God will bring it out, and you can tell you can't hide. You can run, but you can't hide. Whether good or bad. The word evil. Good and evil is always a contrast, and I mentioned this to you. Good and evil is always from the eyes of the beholder. For you, if something is good, means somebody is doing something that you are agreeable to. And if somebody is doing something that is not agreeable to you, that's evil. And so in the eyes of God, who is making the judgment in our lives, good means everything that is agreeable to God, and evil would be everything that is not agreeable. And how do we know what is not agreeable? His commands. So a child would be doing something not agreeable or evil to the mother when he doesn't pick up the toys. He was told to pick up, but didn't pick up. So that's evil in the eyes of the mother. When he picks up the toys, that is good. That's Tov. Tov and Ra. Good and evil. Starting from Genesis all the way throughout the Bible, it is not particularly a moral thing, although it has a moral aspect. But it is generally to tell us there are two sides of a coin. One is what God is happy with. One is what God is not happy with. And each has consequences. So fear God and keep his commandments. For this is our duty, our responsibility, I guess, what we are told. But of course, you remember, the Kohelet said, God made man upright, but man has all these devices to think, to do all kinds of things, which has nothing to do with his commandments. And so, one full circle, God says to enjoy life. This is life under the sun. It's a gift of God. Eat, drink, and be merry, because you will labor. It's a choice. You don't have to, but you can. 2, fear God. Fear God is to bring into mind that every choice we make has the judgment of God in mind. That we want to do what is good and not what is evil in the sight of God, so that we can enjoy life properly with genuine joy, genuine happiness and excitement, because that's what God wants us to do. Enjoy life. We always say Eden is enjoyment. Outside of Eden is hell. Why would God make hell for us? God made the world very good. Yes, we got kicked out of the garden, but it is still the world that God made that he said was very good. Of course, there are obstructions in life, and those are to test us. And so enjoying life is not wrong. So enjoying Musang King is not wrong. But enjoying 10 Musang Kings might be very detrimental to health, right? And so we have the freedom to enjoy, but there is a limit, a boundary to what we do. There's a natural boundary. There is a divine boundary, a sacred boundary given by God in his commandments. And with this, I leave these words with you. Vanity of vanities. All is vanity means brevity of brevity. Everything in life is brief. The good will be brief. The evil will be brief. But we need to know that as we enjoy life, in the labor of life, fear God and keep his commandments, for his commandments is not burdensome. These words are given to people who know God. And we who know God ought to keep the book of Ecclesiastes in heart. And this is the end of all this discussion. The conclusion is a simple thing that we cannot miss. And may God bless all of us in the course of our journey. May God bless us all.